The golden glare of Fairfax Hall did not warm, it blinded. The walls of the enormous ballroom were entirely covered in gold, which in the light of hundreds of wax candles seemed like liquid flame, flowing down the panelling. To Amelia Goodrick, this glare was akin to the bars of a cage. Expensive, exquisite, but unbearably confining. She stood at the edge of the refreshment table, barely touching the delicate lace of her pale blue gown with her fingers. The silk was cold, like everything else in this house. Amelia felt like a stranger here, a temporary exhibit put on display before being finally locked away in storage. "You look lost, darling," came the sweet, honeyed voice of Viola Ashworth beside her. "Or perhaps you're simply admiring how the light plays on your hair. I did tell you that shade of blue would make you almost translucent, otherworldly." Amelia forced herself to smile at her best friend. Viola was the embodiment of vitality. In a brilliant emerald gown, with sparkling eyes, she was the center of attraction for every man in the hall. A memory surfaced in Amelia's mind from a week earlier. Viola's sunlit room, piles of fabric, the feverish gleam in her friend's eyes. "No gold, Amelia," Viola had whispered then, holding a swatch of pale blue silk to her friend's face. "You're so quiet in this. Edmund loves modesty. He always says his future wife should be like the morning mist, barely noticeable, but pleasant to the eye. Don't try to outshine him. This is his evening." She had believed every word back then. She'd been grateful to Viola for her advice, for helping her, daughter of a wealthy but untitled merchant, fit into the world of hereditary aristocrats. Now, under the weight of London society's appraising stares, Amelia understood. This colour hadn't made her otherworldly. It had made her invisible. She was literally fading, against the backdrop of bright uniforms and rich gowns worn by the other ladies. Viola had chosen a shroud for her, not a festive gown. "Yes," Amelia answered quietly. "I do feel rather translucent." Viola patted her hand lightly, and the touch suddenly felt searing to Amelia. "Don't be silly. Tonight is your engagement party. Go drink some lemonade. You're too pale. I'll go find Edmund. He must be eager for his bride. Viola fluttered away, leaving behind a trail of heavy perfume, while Amelia remained standing, feeling an icy lump of anxiety growing inside her. "Careful with that girl, Miss Goodrick. She bites far harder than she appears to." Amelia startled and turned. Before her stood Lady Harrington, an elderly matron whom society called the guillotine behind her back. She was known for being able to destroy the reputation of the most eligible bachelor with a single arch of her brow. Her eyes, sharp and cold as shards of obsidian, scanned Amelia with merciless precision. "Lady Harrington." Amelia dropped into a flawless curtsy. "I'm not quite sure who you mean." "Oh, you understand perfectly well," the old woman snapped, not taking her eyes off her. "Your dress. How charming. For a first communion, perhaps. But for a future countess it's nearly an insult to taste. Though I suppose that's precisely the effect your dear friend was aiming for. She's in emeralds, and you're swathed in a cloud of girlish dreams. The arrangement is plain even to the blind." Amelia felt shame flood her cheeks. "Miss Ashworth wishes me nothing but good." Miss Ashworth wishes good only upon the woman she sees in the mirror each morning. "Lady." Harrington narrowed her eyes, and her voice dropped even lower, sinking right under the skin. "Tell me, dear, does your fiancé write to you often?" The question struck home. Edmund's letters. In recent months they had grown short, dry, full of figures and discussions of her father's business in the East Indian Company. There was no trace of passion in them, not even simple interest in her life. Only assets, investments, and strategic alliances. "Edmund is very occupied with estate matters and our family's trade connections." Amelia answered, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Occupied?" Lady Harrington scoffed. "Yes, I've noticed how occupied he is. He hasn't appeared in the hall for 40 minutes now, nor has your emerald nymph. My advice to you, Miss Goodrick, stop looking at the world through that blue haze. Men are simple creatures. If they're not with you, they're with someone else. And this house has far too many secluded corners where books, and not the most interesting, thing to be found. With those words, Lady Harrington turned away, leaving Amelia alone amid the humming swarm. The matron's words echoed in her head. 40 minutes. Amelia looked around, and indeed, neither Edmund nor Viola was anywhere to be seen. The orchestra's din became unbearable. The scent of hundreds of candles pressed on her temples. She needed to find him. She needed to hear from him that this was all just malicious gossip from an old woman. She needed to discuss that strange coldness in his recent letters, to make sure their marriage wasn't merely a financial transaction. She moved through the crowd, trying to breathe evenly. She passed the card room, where men shrouded in tobacco smoke decided the fates of fortunes. Past the conservatory, where young debutantes whispered among themselves. Her feet carried her toward the library. It was Edmund's favorite place, a room with heavy oak paneling and the smell of old leather, rarely visited by ball guests. The library door stood slightly ajar. A thin strip of light fell across the corridor carpet, and Amelia, already raising her hand to knock, suddenly froze. From deep within the room came laughter, soft, throaty, so familiar that her heart simply stopped beating for a moment. "Oh, Edmund, be careful," Viola whispered. "If someone sees us." "No one will see." Edmund's voice was low, full of the very passion Amelia had so vainly searched for in his letters. "Everyone is far too busy discussing our brilliant union, and how skillfully I've traded my freedom for your father's capital." Amelia pressed herself against the wall, feeling the cold of the stones seep through her gown. She shouldn't be listening. She should leave, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor. Is that really true? Viola's voice turned serious. Only for the money. For what else? There was a rustle of fabric, a sound like an embrace. "Amelia, darling, I won't argue. She's quiet, obedient, she won't ask too many questions while I spend her dowry restoring Fairfax House and indulging my little weaknesses. Her father dreams of joining his blood with a title. He'll pay any price for that. Those £50,000, Viola, they'll open every door before us. I've already calculated it all. Half will go toward paying off my father's debts, the rest toward our little paradise in Italy. Amelia will sit here, do charity work, and bear heirs. And we. You're a monster, Edmund." There was no condemnation in Viola's voice, only admiration. Poor, poor Amelia. She really thinks you fell in love with her for the purity of her soul. Let her think that. Cold steel rang in Edmund's voice. Thinking is all that's left for her. She's boring, Viola. Boring as yesterday's newspaper. If not for her father's gold, I wouldn't have looked at her twice. But now, come here. The sound of a long, wet kiss tore through the silence of the library like a gunshot. Amelia didn't remember pushing open the door. She simply found herself standing in the middle of the room, bathed in the dim light of a single lamp. The scene was exactly as her fevered imagination had painted it. Edmund had Viola pressed against the massive desk. His hand rested shamelessly on her thigh, hiking up the emerald silk. Viola's head was tipped back, her hair spilling across the polished wood. They didn't pull apart right away. At first their eyes held only confusion, as if they couldn't comprehend who had dared interrupt their privacy. Then realization dawned. Viola cried out, frantically straightening her gown. Her face, which a moment before had burned with passion, instantly taking on a mask of frightened repentance. But Edmund didn't even look embarrassed. He slowly straightened the cuffs of his immaculate coat, ran a hand through his hair, and looked at Amelia as though she were an irritating insect that had flown into his study. "Amelia," Viola said, false tears trembling in her voice. "It's not what it looks like. I was just upset about Lord Tratton's rudeness, and Edmund." "Enough, Viola." Amelia's voice was quiet, but there was such clarity in it that both of them fell silent. "I heard everything. About the £50,000. About Italy. About how I'm boring." Edmund took a step forward, hands clasped behind his back. His face took on an expression of condescending patience, the way an adult looks at a sulking child. "Listen to me, Amelia. You're making a scene over nothing. It's the ball. The champagne has gone to your head. And you've begun imagining things." "Imagining what?" That you were comforting Viola on top of a desk, discussing my dowry like a lot at auction. You're behaving hysterically. Edmund's voice hardened. It was the classic tactic he always used whenever she tried to voice her opinion, gaslighting, dressed up in aristocratic form. Your fortune, Amelia, is part of our agreement. Your father buys you a place in society. I provide that standing with my name. It's a fair exchange. And as for finding some understanding with Viola, well, perhaps if you were less translucent and more alive, I wouldn't have needed to seek warmth elsewhere. Viola sobbed, hiding her face in her hands, but Amelia could see her peeking through her fingers. Don't you understand how the world works? Edmund continued, stepping closer. He smelled of expensive brandy and someone else's perfume. This marriage will happen. You'll calm yourself, return to the hall, and we'll announce the engagement. By tomorrow you'll have forgotten this incident, like a bad dream. You don't want to disgrace your father, do you? You don't want to become a laughingstock of all London? A jilted bride, that's a stain for life. No one needs you, Amelia. Without my title, you're nothing but a merchant's daughter with a sack of money. Sit quietly and be grateful that I'm even agreeing to bring you into my household. Amelia looked at him and no longer recognized the man she had been about to marry. Beneath the mask of nobility lay a rot so deep it made her physically ill. I will not marry you, Edmund, she said, and her voice grew steady. Not tomorrow, not ever. Our agreement is dissolved. Edmund laughed, scornfully. And who will believe you? Your word against mine. I'll say you went mad with jealousy. You'll be locked in an asylum before you can even reach your father. Look at yourself. You're a pale shadow. You have no power, no allies. Oh, there you are mistaken. Mr. Fairfax. Miss Goodrick does have allies, and rather influential ones. The voice that rang out from the dark corner of the library struck like the crack of a whip. Deep, commanding, chilling to the bone. All three of them froze. From the shadows of the massive bookshelves, where the lamp's light could not reach, a tall figure slowly emerged. George Cavendish, Duke of Ashford. In London they called him the Iron Duke. Legends surrounded him. The wealthiest, most private, and most dangerous man in government. Ministers feared him. Kings sought his favour. He stood leaning against a shelf of ancient folios, arms crossed over his chest. His face, as though carved from granite, betrayed nothing but icy contempt. Edmund went so pale he matched the colour of his starched shirts. Why, your grace, he stammered, backing away and nearly knocking over a chair. We didn't know you were here. We were just. I have been here for quite some time, the Duke interrupted. He walked slowly to Amelia and stood directly behind her. She felt the heat radiating from him, and an aura of absolute power. And I heard every word of this fascinating negotiation. George turned his gaze to Edmund, who flinched as though struck. You spoke of a stain. Fairfax, about Miss Goodrick being needed by no one. The Duke paused, and the silence in the room grew taut as a wire. I believe you have the roles reversed. The only stain to be placed tonight is the stain of dishonor upon your family name. My lord, you don't understand. This is a private quarrel. Edmund tried to interject, but George raised a hand, and the words died in his throat. A private quarrel ended the moment you decided to rob a woman under my protection, the Duke said. Miss Goodrick is no mere merchant's daughter. From this moment, she is a lady whose peace I personally guard. He turned to Amelia. His grey eyes, usually cold as steel, softened for a moment as they met her bewildered gaze. Miss Goodrick, he said quietly, I believe there is nothing more for you to do here. Allow me to escort you back to the hall. We have an announcement to make that will leave. Mr. Fairfax regretting that he ever woke up this morning. Amelia looked at the Duke's outstretched hand, the broad palm of a man who could topple an empire with a single stroke of his pen. She knew this step would change everything. She would no longer be translucent. She would no longer be invisible. She placed her hand in his. Gladly, Your Grace, she answered. Behind them, Viola sank to the floor, finally weeping in earnest, and Edmund Fairfax stood in the library's crushing silence, realizing that his life, built on lies and gold, had just turned to ash beneath the heel of the most powerful man in London. When the library doors closed behind them, cutting off Viola's sobs and Edmund's paralyzed silence, Amelia felt reality around her beginning to thin. The corridor seemed an endless tunnel bathed in golden light, and the Duke of Ashford's hand on her arm was the only fixed point in this suddenly upended world. George did not lead her back to the ballroom. He turned unerringly toward a side exit leading to the terrace. The cool night air struck her face, bringing momentary relief. But inside, an icy storm still raged. They descended the stone steps into the garden. Far behind them the orchestra thundered on. But here, among the trimmed hedges and sleeping rose bushes, silence reigned, broken only by the rustle of her silk hem against the gravel. The Duke walked in silence. He offered no hollow comfort, asked no questions about how she felt. His presence was heavy, almost tangible, like a storm cloud frozen just before the lightning strikes. Amelia felt her body begin to tremble faintly. It wasn't the cold, it was the delayed reaction to her life, having just shattered into 1,000 pieces. She clenched her fists so tightly her nails bit into her palms through the thin gloves. "You may scream, if you wish," George said suddenly. His voice in the quiet garden sounded surprisingly gentle, stripped of the cutting steel he'd just used to torment Fairfax. "Or break something. At this end of the garden, Lord Fairfax keeps a collection of tasteless terracotta vases. No one would mourn their disappearance." Amelia stopped. She breathed deeply, trying to hold back the tears already burning her eyelids. She would not let him see her weakness, not the Duke of Ashford, whose mercy was as much a mystery as his wrath. "I have no intention of breaking anything, Your Grace," she answered, and her voice, to her own surprise, came out almost steady. That would be a needless waste of energy. George stopped and slowly turned to face her. In the silvery moonlight his face looked like a mask cast from pale metal. He studied her intently, not as a man studies a woman at a ball, but as a general studies a map before a decisive battle. "You have a remarkable backbone, Miss Goodrick," he observed, and in his tone there was something like genuine astonishment. "Most debutantes in your position would already have fainted, or filled this garden with sobbing. Yet you stand here as though merely discussing the weather, though you've just learned your fiancé is a thief and your friend a traitor. What else is there for me to do?" Amelia lifted her head, meeting his steady gaze. "Faint. That would only give Edmund grounds to say I'm weak-minded. I won't give him that satisfaction." George's mouth curved in a faint smirk. The half-smile did nothing to soften his face, it only sharpened his predatory grace. "You're perceptive, but composure alone isn't enough. By tomorrow morning, Fairfax will begin his campaign. He'll spread word that he was the one who broke the engagement, because he found you, shall we say, insufficiently virtuous. In London, a lie told first, and with enough confidence, becomes the truth." Amelia felt a lump rise in her throat. "My father, he'll be ruined. All his hopes, his investments." "Your father is a merchant," George cut in. "He understands the value of assets. And right now, your most valuable asset is your reputation. In this city, it's worth more than all the gold of the East Indian Company. It's a weapon, Miss Goodrick, and if you don't pull the trigger first, Fairfax will." He began slowly circling her, as though drawing her into some strange, unsettling dance. "You must be wondering why I intervened. Why the Duke of Ashford, who avoids society scandals like the plague, would suddenly decide to become the protector of a merchant's daughter. That question hasn't left me since the moment you stepped out of the shadows, my lord." George stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of sandalwood and fine tobacco. The Fairfaxes are a weed in England's political field, greedy, indiscriminate in their alliances, representing the interests of men I intend to erase from the House of Lords. Edmund is their hope of restoring influence through your dowry. If he gets your father's money, he becomes dangerous. I cannot allow that." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "So I'm merely a means for you to strike at your political rivals. Another piece on the chessboard." "In this world, everyone is a piece," he answered coldly. "The only difference is who moves them. But I'm offering you a deal, Miss Goodrick, a mutually beneficial. Arrangement that will save your honor and help me pull the poison teeth from the Fairfax family. And what are the terms of this arrangement? George reached out and carefully smoothed a stray lock of her hair. The gesture was almost intimate, yet it sent a chill down Amelia's spine. We return to the hall right now, and we return not as casual acquaintances. I shall let it be known to society that you are the object of my most pointed and ardent interest. We'll stage a performance. I'll call it your home, escort you on walks, dance with you at balls. We'll make all of London believe that it was you who cast Fairfax aside, because beside the brilliance of a duke's coronet, everything else pales.